She was really passionate in everything she did. Passionate in loving her family, passionate at work. She also had this drive and this fire about her, which I have yet to see in another person. She loved her family very fiercely, and me, of course. Sorry. She made a point to really keep the bond between us sisters a big part of her life, you know. We just had a connection like ever since we were little girls. I think it was because we were so close in age. And we just got along, and she understood me and I understood her. She understood what I wanted out of life, and I understood what she wanted out of life. And I'm just glad, you know, while she was here, that she really made a point to be close with me and her brother. I appreciate that we were so close, and she put such an effort into sisterhood, I guess. And she had this work ethic, like in every job she ever had. She was like a go-getter, and she like loved success and accomplishment, and she made that like a part of her life. And I think that's really important. And I think that's rare in someone so young to have that kind of drive and work. There's not like a specific story because it happened all the time, but like I would confide in Ariana like with everything, you know, whether it just be my like day-to-day life or my problems. And I never confided in anyone else, like not the rest of my family, not my friends, like just her for some reason. But every time I did confide in her, mostly with my problems, she just always knew what to say, you know, and she would get me out of my rut and make me feel better somehow. Or like offering her 2 cents, or just giving me advice, or whatever it may be. She just like knew like what to say. Probably sister's intuition or something.
Well, of course, like when Ariana was a little kid, she was always wanted to, or she was just a hard worker in general. And I just like if I wanted to tell anything or someone anything about her, I would say that she was a really hard worker. And even when she was 15, she wanted to go out and get a job, even though she couldn't. And as soon as she turned 16, she was turning in dozens of applications and always hitting the books and stuff like that. So I'd want to say she's a hard worker. We had a pretty good relationship. I would go hang out with her at her house every once in a while, and she would come here and we would go see a movie or get dinner or something. I saw a lot of myself in her and like how we're really similar. We definitely support something like this. I mean, yeah, that's obvious, but she would, I don't know, if it was her making this, it would be really well done, really like, there's a lot of work put into it, and it's like she wouldn't stop until she's accomplished her goal. So I would want that to be me and my parents do for her.
So domestic violence, by definition, is a pattern of abuse that usually is engaged in by intimate partners and usually gets worse over time. So there's different kinds of abuse. We don't just focus on violence per se. In fact, a small percentage of folks that are engaged in intimate partner relationships that contact us are necessarily contacting us because they've experienced physical violence. Usually the violence and the abuse doesn't even manifest for a period of time. So it's not as though there are red flags waving at the outset of a relationship in which that ultimately ends up being abusive. Sometimes it's subtle verbal abuse. It's a put down here or there, or an attempt to undermine, or it's a pattern. Essentially, domestic violence is a pattern of control. And it is about control. It's not an anger management issue. It's about power and control. And so we approach it from that standpoint, and we address the fact that violence is never acceptable and abuse is never the survivor's or the victim's fault. There's also financial abuse, spiritual abuse. You know, people control their income within their families and don't allow the victim to have access to funds. They'll prevent them from attending church, or they'll force them to go to a church that they don't feel comfortable in. There's, of course, sexual abuse of all kinds. So psychological abuse, oftentimes you just have to have the mere implication of violence. You never have to actually implement it. If you want it, you can control your environment and your family in that way. Oftentimes pets are abused, are used as a means to intimidate and control. So there are many barriers to leaving an abusive relationship, not the least of which is something that many of us commonly experience, which is called love, right? And when you're in a relationship, you often not only love the person, but you love them sometimes even when they make you mad, or when they make you sad, or if your religious convictions are such that you think you ought to stay. So one of them sort of tied together in my mind is love and hope that things will change. And oftentimes there's a cycle where there's a buildup, and then the abuse occurs, and then there's this period of what we call the honeymoon phase, where there's apologies and promises to never have it happen again. And when you consider the context of a family in which usually the victim wants to keep her family together, oftentimes that can be pretty compelling. When you begin to look at folks that are, you know, given that domestic violence affects people from all walks of life, regardless of regardless of their class background or their religious background, their culture, their gender, their immigration status. I mean, it really crosses all boundaries. But for the majority of folks who identify as being poor or working class, given that their resources are more limited, their barriers may be larger and more inhibiting. Right. So for example, if you have no income without your partner, or you have no education, then your chances of choosing to leave are going to be greater without some additional support. Similarly, if your immigration status is such that your partner threatens to have you deported, even though that's legally not legitimate, you might hesitate to take action on your own behalf. Usually when people come to us, women who have children they won't necessarily come as quickly or as easily, or decide to make a move to change their lives that dramatically by leaving until they see and experience or feel the impact of the domestic violence on their children. And for their children, then they will have the courage to make that change. So one of the things I didn't mention before in terms of a barrier to leaving is the level of shame that still exists, right? And so that's a huge piece of this. And so domestic violence reporting is actually tremendously depressed relative to the actual incidents. I think it's roughly 1 in 5, they say, of actual domestic violence incidents are reported to either a health department or anyone who's engaged in trying to provide support. So when I think about the numbers that represents in terms of the fact that at Cora, we receive 12,000 calls a year. That's just from the folks who know who we are and have the courage to call. We figure then that the need is far greater. So the issue is really making sure that the conversations are public, that people realize that this is a public issue, not a private matter, that people that are subject to The privacy of their homes aren't limited in terms of the support they receive because they just aren't necessarily seen. That the kinds of abuse that happens in private is really scary and more prevalent than people realize because we have the combination of very few witnesses and the fact that there's so much shame associated with it that people don't talk about it. And at some point they begin to believe, oftentimes, that they deserve it. We once had a client who, I remember, she had a list in her mind of all the things that angered her partner, that triggered him. And she felt it was her responsibility to keep track of those things. And if she forgot any of them, like one day she forgot while she was emptying the dishwasher, that makes him mad when he's watching the television, that it was her fault she got beaten up because she forgot. That's how twisted it can become. Right. So this kind of support is tremendously important, and it gives a voice to the issue. You know, domestic violence has been dubbed the single greatest, largest human rights issue of our time. And women are half the planet's population, and we have to have some kind of forum for protection. And there is no greater way to create a peaceful and just and civil society than to have homes be safe.
I got to know Ariana as she applied for a job as a hostess. And I remember she first took that job and she came in and applied as a hostess and said, I'm going to start off as a hostess, but you're going to have to teach me to serve, bus, manage, all of the above, because I'm a business major and I'm going to do it all. And she really did. She was working here full-time. She was working, I remember, later on at the bank. And then she was also going to school full-time, trying to graduate. But she really, really did pick up and I guess if I could describe her in one word, it would be a burst of sunshine. And she would really add to the whole ambiance of Aria. And whether it was a 1-year-old to an 80-year-old, she just knew how to put a smile on your face. In regards to service, and she understood hospitality. Oh God, I mean, she was your typical little young person in a grown-up's body. So I remember my favorite story would be, I would so-called be mom because my daughter and her are the same age. And she would come in and I go, that's a little short, don't you think? And she had quite the wardrobe. Working at Forever 21, I think that's what it was. And she would always come in with the dresses and the skirts and the outfits. And I just kind of stare and go, she goes, what, did my mom call you before I got here? And I was like, no, I am a mom, you forgot. I'm like, so we got to really get close. I mean, I really did play mom, manager, boss, all of the above to her. You know, in life you come across very few people that hold your heart. You come across people in everyday life where you become friends with, or you become family with, or you work with. But there are very, very few people like her that's got a place in your heart. And she was just one of those people with us. She was really family. And hearing her news was just, I was devastated. First of all, having my own kids and being so close to her. We remodeled this restaurant and reopened, and I remember when I first got done, I told Mike, my husband, and I said, honey, can you imagine the look on Ariana's face seeing this restaurant the way it is now? Because she always used to talk, so what are you going to do next? What are we going to do? It was always, what are we going to do next? How are we going to do this? How are we going to fix this? And it was just her personality, basically, that just got us glued to her. And in spirit, I know she's here. Sometimes it's funny, you know, I tell my husband, I go, honey, we've had so many hostess and we've had so many people, but we've had one Ariana.
Someone come in and apply for a job. Her name is Ariana. I think she was around 18 when we started here. And she was all positive, talking. The first day, usually I do 2 interviews, then Farah does it. We go through step by step. But she was so positive right there. I tell her, okay, let's start. and she came in, and it takes time to train people. And I guess she was working another place as a cashier, and then she came here, and when she came here, she just took her 1 or 2 days to take over the front, take over the position that she was signed for, and very soon everybody know her in the neighborhood. She was friendly with everybody, take over, and she remember everyone remember her, an excellent girl. Ariane, I didn't work here that much with her, but I heard a lot about her. I used to come work here on the weekend because it's the busiest time. And when I'm on the floor as an executive chef or owner, and I go talk to the people, everybody talk about Ariana. I said, oh, then I come to Ariana say, hey, I tell Ariana, what's going on? Everybody talking about you than me. That was really something that for the young age, it takes people many, many years to get to the point that what she was. And I have a lot of employees. I owned 8 restaurants. And she was one that everybody remember between most of my employees. I have great employees, but she was active, positive. As soon as she comes in, everybody knows Ariana is here. Take over the place, take over the shift, and start running it by herself. That it takes a lot of manager to do that. She already running the place as a young girl. Okay? Or if she sees something, she call me, say, Mike, this is what's happening in the restaurant. She cared about the place a lot. We cared about her a lot, and we really miss her. I mean, we all miss her. We all miss her here.
She was hired here years ago as a hostess, and she was a delightful young lady to work with. I enjoyed the time I had with her, and we also did things sometimes after work. She would call and ask me for help for something, kind of a guy thing, and I wouldn't mind at all, and I would take the time out of my day off to give her a hand. I still own a moped that she sold me that's in my garage, and when I look at it, I think of her. She just needed a way out at that time, but I loved working with the young lady, and like I was saying earlier, when I trained her, she picked up everything really quick. There's some people that I train, it's a process, and she just rolled right into the part. She always came to work with a smile on her face. She really likes to dress up. Matter of fact, the owner's wife sometimes would say, are you going to a nightclub tonight, or are you going to work? And it was funny, because she just liked to dress up, so she always looked nice, and she was a really hard worker, really punctual, and she would do things outside her job description. Meaning she was a hostess, but you know, not many most hostesses just stay in the front, but if she saw that tables needed to be set or anything else needed to be done, she would just jump in without being asked.